Good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and tonight it's Monday night, so it's McDuff and Nixon night, and Garland Nixon is right here, ready to roll tonight. So, good evening, Garland. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Looking forward to another great talk. Plenty of things going on always, and looking forward to having some fun.
Yeah, let's.
Oh, I have to turn on comments. I always like to look at the comments. I like to see what people are saying and what people are interested in.
Yeah, look, there's Debbie is here, Kate Corky's here, and ECAT, Rhina, and nice to have everyone with us here tonight at McDuff Lives. We're really enjoying our conversations with Garland Nixon, who brings a point of view that you might not have heard before, but if you pay attention, you're going to realize that he makes a heck of a lot of sense. That's the way I feel about it anyway. And I love to have you here, Garland, and there I will let you pick the first topic. Tee one up.
Let me start with one. It's pretty interesting, and I don't know. I just think it's a story that I covered last week that I thought it was interesting, and that is the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. What happened with him? Right. So a couple of things, and it's an example of the media. So what they're covering with him, they cover a lot of salacious stuff. He touched some women or something. He made them feel bad or something. Now, and this is, I guess, crappy. He just signed, after all the errors that it's come out and how he screwed up in the fall, and they tried to turn him into some kind of he was the great COVID hero. Remember, he was on CNN and MSNBC every day. So he just signed a book for $5.1 million. So he's going to, of course, you know how they do. He's going to get rich off of that. But here's the thing I think that's interesting. So people are talking about that. I feel like that's a cover up. Let me tell you why. There's another story behind that that's bad. And you ever notice sometimes they'll give you a story that looks kind of bad and it's salacious, but it's like to cover up from looking at the real thing. So here's the real bad story with Cuomo. So he's got a political machine, right? So you know what I mean? He's got like other hangers on politicians and other organizations and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huge.
So at the time, this organization, I think it's called either the New York Hospital Association or the New York City Hospital Association, but they go by the acronym, right? They gave him and his political machine around $2.1 million, right? Now, this is the story that isn't being covered. And at the same time they did that, they even bragged about this. They wrote some legislation that would protect them from liability when it came to COVID and people getting sick and all that kinds of stuff, right? So basically, they're giving his machine of $2 million. They brag. They write the legislation. They give it to him and his people. They drive it through. But it's now we're finding out it's not just COVID and things like that and screw ups that they made that they're going to be shielded from liability for other things that aren't even related to COVID. So that's why I say it's kind of a cover up. So when you hear this story about Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York, well, he touched some women or whatever, right? And none of those stories, I mean, they're all, he shouldn't have done any of it if it's out what he's saying is right. But he was not like accused of rape or assault or anything like that. It's like one of them said he touched her or something, or said he wanted to ask if he could kiss her, that kinds of stuff, right? Nothing that appears to be like he sexually assaulted somebody. So they'll talk about that. There may be gripe about his book, but the issue of a politician taking millions of dollars, allowing the lobbyist who gave you the $1 million to literally write the legislation and then drive the legislation in that protects them from liability, that's a real story. But that's what our media is about. They'll give us a story that seems to be important and salacious and attractive and sexy and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like they're going after Andrew Cuomo, when in my opinion, they're protecting him from the real story. Because if people were talking about the real story, that's like getting millions of dollars and letting these crooks write their own legislation and driving it through for them. There could be illegalities go there. But here's the other thing. That money got passed around. He's got a political machine, which means he's not the only one that benefited from that. You know what I mean? That the other politicians and hangers on benefited from that. So that's one story I was covering last week. And people were like, oh my gosh, he touched women. He got money. I said, time out. time out. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I see that story. But there's a whole lot of uglier things going on. And isn't it interesting how even when we say the media is hiding or covering up a story, sometimes when it appears they're going after somebody or it appears they're giving us a story, in reality, it's just a cover for something else. It's like, look over here, he's doing this, so you won't see what he's really doing. And I think the reason is because politicians aren't going to go after people. They don't want it in the news because the rest of them are doing it. And they don't want, to come up with this discussion and people will start looking at them and saying, well, wait a minute, Senator so-and-so, you got $1 million and you let somebody write the legislation, etc. So that seemed like an important story to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Forgive me, but I remember when all that was going on at the beginning, and those of us that have been skeptical about Andrew Cuomo and the Cuomo brothers for a long time have been following this pretty closely. And the idea that he was the decision maker that said to put all the COVID cases into the elder care facilities in the nursing homes. And so there was a groundswell of people saying, Andrew Cuomo killed my grandmother. And this was not a small effort. A lot of people were saying things like that. And that to me is very much allied to the political chess game in which lives have been played with. For instance, when President Trump saw something coming and sent the hospital ship up to New York, that was a chess move. That hospital ship could have taken care of all the COVID cases, kept all them old folks safe. There was no reason that you had to do it. Plus, the hospitals were basically empty too. They had one hospital which they were using for photo ops and lines of people outside. But generally speaking, and I remember this, that it was shocking that they would put people with an illness, a contagious illness, into old folks' homes. But doggone it, that's what they did, and that now what you're telling me adds fury to the flame, because he not only did he do that, but he got legislation through for all of the people that could possibly be liable out of that event to be exonerated or exempt from liability, and got a big paycheck from that. So when do people start holding him accountable? We've been watching this guy for a long time, and he's not. He hasn't passed the smell test for a lot of people on, and maybe I don't know what side I'm on anymore, but on the side that is critical of the establishment and still seeking an honorable government. And this guy cannot be considered that at all. And it's all a payoff. I mean, book deals are payoffs. That's $5.2 million for a book. Come on, he's getting the money, but all of this stuff is just smoke and mirrors. Who really is going to control that money? Who's
Well, and here's the thing, okay, and like you said, it's a payoff. He makes people a lot of money. And they just, you'll find that, these companies, a lot of them are owned by the same people. They got shell companies. They got 10 different companies. So you help me with my hospital company over here. Well, I own 4 or 5 other companies. One of them may be a book company. One of them may be whatever. You know what I mean? I'll find a way to launder the money into your hands. So, and here's the other part. This whole COVID thing, the wealthy, powerful people, what's that book, The Shock Doctrine or whatever? Anything that happens, they utilize it to make money. If a comet hit the Earth tomorrow and a third of the population would die, if the Earth died, but people like us would be like, oh, what a tragedy. How can we save people? People have died. How can we we'd be thinking about the people. They'd be looking at it like, well, let's see, a third less people, but what will they be needing? They'd be thinking about how they could get rich off of it. So look right here, just one person, one crooked politician, Cuomo. He gets $2 million into his coffers immediately. Now he's getting 5 million. You know what I mean? He gets 2 million in his political coffers. Now he's getting 5 million here. When we look at everything that happened here, that whatever you think of COVID or whatever, right? Here's the bottom line. These people take any disastrous, well, not disastrous. It could be good. It could be bad. It don't matter. Anything that happens, they use it to find another way to put money out of it. It's not that just that they're getting rich. It's that they're extracting the money out of the working class, out of the poor, the working poor. They're extracting money out of their pockets, putting it into them. You look at this whole COVID. To me, one of the perfect examples, and I know is okay. COVID comes, we got to shut. Supposedly, it never really was a real shutdown. It was never a real shutdown. You know, people were working all over the place, doing all kinds of things. So it wasn't a real shutdown. But I can't go, if you own a little sporting goods store and you sell gloves and baseball bats and things like that, okay, you got to close down. And you got a little corner the sporting goods store, and it may be 4, 5, 6 people in it at a time. You got to close down because it's too dangerous. Everybody could catch COVID. We'd all surely die, right? But Walmart can sell those same baseball mitts and gloves and basketballs and everything else that you can't open to sell. And you know how it was during COVID. Walmart was packed. So the stores that had a little few amount of people in it, they had to close down. The big store that was packed with people, well, they could be open. Well, that doesn't make sense if you believe that this thing spreads all over the place. If you really think about it, if you were thinking about a pandemic and things like that, and you're like, well, here's what I'm going to do. The small stores where only a few people will be in, they can open up and they can still have, so many people, but so many people can come in. The big ones like Walmart that'll be packed with tons of people, we can't open those because too many people. It would have made sense if you're just thinking about spreading a disease to do it exactly the opposite way. But they saw, oh boy, there's a disease. How can we use it to line our pockets? And from the very beginning of this thing, that's all the rich and powerful have done, is find a way to line their pockets. Now they get the stores shut down. And think about this. You got a restaurant. And I have friends that own restaurants. I have plenty of friends that are business people, etc., right? You got to figure out how to keep this restaurant open with what's in your pocket. I know people who had, their life savings and things like that, and they had to spend a lot of money, and that were hoping when the pandemic's open, when this thing opens back up, I hope I can get and try to recoup my money and stuff like that, right? And some people didn't have it; they lost their businesses, right? But if you own a chain restaurant, those like a lot of those were open anyway. But if you own, the fast foods and stuff like that, but if you own a chain restaurant, what the heck? Who cares? Because if you run out of money, guess what? The U.S. government is the lender of last resort. So if you got a big corporation, guess what? You can sell them bonds and the U.S. government will buy your bonds and keep you. I don't care how bad you are. I don't care how much debt you got. You got a big corporation. They'll buy your bonds no matter how junky they are, and they'll keep you they will keep you open. But if you got a little small business and you need to make feed your family, sorry, you're screwed. Go out of business. They got nothing for you. And that was the tale of COVID. And I think people are waking up. I think a lot of people have already woken up, but not enough. But I think some people are starting to wake up and realize that they've been had. And that's not a discussion about COVID. You know what I mean? That's not a discussion about the ill. That's nothing about it. That's a discussion about the same oligarchs and crooked politicians doing anything they can, using everything they can, everything at their disposal to extract money from us and to put it in their pockets.
Yeah, I remember a story about certain senators selling certain stocks in advance of this incident being announced, if I recall correctly, and that kind of obvious cheating, it's supposedly legal, for Congress to get advance stock tips now and enrich themselves on it. They've changed so many laws, and they're all against the idea of a moral integrity in our government.
Yeah.
I wanted to just say one more thing about COVID, and that is that at least from my point of view, it looks like some people are noticing the lab leak theory of origin, and I'm wondering from where you sit, are people latching on to the idea that yeah, this probably was a creation of a laboratory somewhere, without trying to focus on who, but just the idea that this is not a natural occurrence. This is something that came out. This is a Frankenstein virus from a lab. Has that hit your radar screen?
Yeah, it has. And you know, the funny thing about it, it's not funny, but I use that term all the time. You couldn't even talk about that. You couldn't even have that discussion. If you had that discussion, you'd be demonetized. You'd be
I
thrown off.
was.
You'd be, yeah, you know what I mean? You
I
couldn't even,
lost my whole channel. I probably a good $8,000-10,000 of it was a disaster, and they did it to everybody.
yes.
No, they
And
did it to everybody.
if you talked about it, you were crazy conspiracy theorists and all. But I back then was trying to talk about it some. I wasn't trying to say, oh, I know this was true or false, but I felt like, you know what? Any discussion, as long as it's an intellectual discussion, as long as you just don't come out with something, well, the Martians brought it and threw it on everybody or something. If you're trying to have an open and honest discussion, it's worth it. And this is what I said way back. I was like, wait a minute. It just so happens that you got a lab that studies coronaviruses and that studies how coronaviruses transfer between people and animals. And 11 miles from that lab, like the only lab in the world that is like focuses on that. And coincidentally, 11 miles from that lab is supposedly where that thing showed up. And let's not forget, the US, that wasn't just China. The US was giving millions of dollars to that lab. Fauci was involved. You know what I mean? The US CDC was involved. So it wasn't that the Chinese virus, the US had a hand in that whole thing too, right? It was like an international thing. So that's why part of why I think they were probably more inclined to, if in fact there was a cover up, we don't know for sure that there was, but if there was, I would say it could be inclined, people could be, you could see a motivation for a cover up from a whole lot of people, right? But think about this. So this lab is like highly specialized in that particular area. 11 miles from there, it shows up at this wet market or whatever. Here's what I said at the beginning, because it doesn't mean that though they planned to do it or they didn't plan it. Here's what in the very beginning, here's what I said. Well, wait a minute. They said, it came from this wet market. Whoa. Let's just say I worked at that lab, right? And I'm fumbling with these viruses and I get exposed to one of them unknowingly, right? And I go to the wet market to buy something, to see something, whatever, right? See, it didn't have to come from the wet market. What happens if some of the employees get off and they go there and they buy food or they buy stuff regularly, right? They cough on somebody, they leave, and then it shows up. And they're like, it came from the wet market. Well, yeah, maybe it came from the wet market via the Wuhan lab. So if right now, if I, in my house, cook up some kind of illness on the stove, oh, I got a virus and I invent a virus, right? And it takes me over and I go down to the local mall and I cough on 3 or 4 people. And they say, well, it first showed up at the mall. Well, it didn't come from the mall. I went over there and exposed somebody to it. It came from my house. I cooked it up. So at the very beginning, I thought to myself, they're playing with these viruses. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff to them. What happens? They're fumbling with this stuff. Their protocol, maybe their security, their safety protocols are maybe screwed up. Somebody gets exposed to it. They go to the local wet market or whatever. They cough all over creation. Somebody gets it and it's out. And now they don't want to, like, if they find out, we got big problems. And the US is happy to cover it up, because if they're like, yeah, we were kind of putting some money into that lab too, everybody's going to be mad at us. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but
Right.
I think at least, without going into any theories about somebody intentionally doing it, don't you think, and this was my theory from the very beginning, was what happens if somebody went to this wet market, coughed or whatever, exposed people to it? I don't think that's a crazy conspiracy theory. To me, that makes sense. What do you think?
Yeah, and what's wrong with talking about it?
Right.
This is my problem. Is reasonable people can consider. I reminds me of this definition of intelligence that I kind of like. It's intelligence is the ability to entertain an idea without necessarily accepting it.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're thinking about things. We're not saying this is what I believe or this is true or anything, but we're having a conversation about very complicated facts, trying to make sense of it. That's what humans do. And to stifle us from doing that is got to be some kind of a crime. That's just an astounding thing, to find yourself being censored for having reasonable thoughts about possibilities of this horrifically damaging virus event. And yeah, thank you for that. I absolutely agree with you that is a very logical scenario that could have happened. It could be. And then that also reminds me of what you were saying a little bit earlier about what I've heard other people call a black swan event. That is, that you don't expect a black swan to come along very often, but when one does, if you know about it, if you're on the inside, like suppose you're Fauci and you've just heard that this cove thing has gotten out, of the lab, if you have an investment in certain pharmaceutical companies, which I believe he does, then that's inside information. That's the kind of way to make money off of tragedy. I'm not suggesting that's what he did do. I'm just saying that it's a reasonable thing to think about, especially when you consider how long he's been in this business and how much money he has accumulated through that type of investment in pharmaceuticals. So it's just it's frustrating, but I'm not going to kowtow to the gods of YouTube. This is a free country as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to stand on my rights.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm reading, and this is in mainstream media now. The mainstream media, and that was my original thought, because I was like, I find it, it's just too coincidental. You got the lab that studied this, and 11 miles away of all this gigantic planet, of all the places on the planet, the odds of this thing showing up 11 miles from the only lab that studies this, the odds are astronomically against that, right? So I'm like, it doesn't make sense. So now they're saying, listen to this. Apparently, 2 employees who worked at that lab got sick like a couple weeks or something before this thing showed up with similar similar symptoms to COVID and went to the hospital. 2 employees of the lab. You know what I think it is? They know. And for one other reason, they always knew everything, right? I think they fear it's going to get out. And so they're little by little putting a little bit of it out. Well, it could be a lab leak. Well, there was a couple of employees that got sick a couple of weeks before that. And let me tell you something. As soon as those employees got sick, they knew they were screwed. If this is what happened, as soon as they're like, oh, crap. Well, let's just hope everybody doesn't have it. Let's just hope this thing we designed, if they designed it or whatever, then isn't as bad as we thought it was. So you figure we're both fairly intelligent people, and either one of us, you're running a lab with all of this crap, and all of a sudden a couple of your employees get sick and they're in the hospital. You're going to be like, guys, we got a big problem here. This thing is out. But we weren't allowed to talk about it.
Well, we
until the
were told
mainstream
that
media
it
talks about it.
wasn't, the WHO was even saying, well, this is not going to be any big deal. It's not nothing to get alarmed about. Early on, they were just letting the contagion spread, while giving us a message of don't worry about it. I remember Nancy Pelosi walking into Chinatown in San Francisco, and just walking around talking to people. Nobody was wearing masks at that time, and
Right.
you know, the, just acting like there's no worry of spread of contagion. And now, a month later, everybody's got to be afraid of breathing on each other and wearing masks and all of this. It's all just very, very confusing. And but I appreciate your willingness to discuss the matter online with me. I know it's difficult. Believe me, it's a terrible subject to have to talk about, especially in the context of the pressure being put on everyone to take a vaccine. Our governor, Larry Hogan, has instituted a lottery reward. If you get a vaccine now, you can get your name put into a lottery, and there'll be some $40,000 drawings for people who have taken the vaccine. And I think, how can they do that? The people that don't take the vaccine, don't we have an equal right to share in the lottery of Maryland, based on Maryland taxpayers' money? But that is something that is definitely on my mind a lot, is that people who are not going to take the experimental jab are going to get ostracized and shunned and kept out of public events, and otherwise shamed, and probably have proselytizers coming around knocking on the door saying, hey, you know what, we need to talk to you about your COVID vaccination.
Well, Max Blumenthal says something interesting I never thought about. He says it's not a vaccine. He calls it the shot. He says, because the concept being this, okay, when I was a little kid, we got the polio vaccine, which means I can't get polio, right? You get the vaccine, you ain't getting polio, right? Well, when they first started giving the shot, they said, okay, you won't be able to give it. Well, since this is experimental, then they said, oh, well, looks like you can still get it, because this is an experimental thing. They had to give it to people. Then they had to start watching these people to figure out what exactly was going to happen. They didn't know, right? So now they say you can get it, but you probably won't get sick and go to the hospital and die. So now some people still get sick and go to the hospital and die, and some people can still get it. So bit by bit, they're saying, okay, but the odds are down. Now, look, okay. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent, because if it's experimental, the only way you're going to find out is giving it to people and watching and seeing what happens. But to me, there's using the word vaccine, but you're not vaccinated against the illness, because you can still get them. It's a shot. Eventually they said, hey, boom, you're good. Now what they're realizing is it's a shot, it's a jab, but you're not vaccinated against the illness. You can still get it. Bill Maher had to cancel his show. He got the shot. Next thing you know, he had sometime later, he came up with COVID. So you can still get it. And that's, I think, the part that I know a lot of people who are not anti-medicine or anti-science or anti-anything, but I do know a lot of people who simply say, look, my issue is it's experimental. Normally it goes to the FDA, and they have to do, like 18 months or 2 years testing, and then they decide whether it's good or not. They bypassed all of that and they just put it out there. So I'd love to have friends that are saying, well, I'm going to wait 18 months or whatever the period of time is, just like they normally do, and watch it before I make a decision. And most of those people have looked at it and they've seen a lot of complications, and they're going, more worried in the other direction than more positive towards it. But the reality is, regardless of what you think of all of this, right? If I go to when my dad was 80 years old, he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is bone cancer. And my dad said, you know what? I'm 80. I'm not going to do the treatments that they want me to take. You know what I mean? All of the regular stuff. He says, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. He lived actually 4 years. And the doctor said, you probably lived a lot longer than you would if you'd have taken the treatment, because at 80, you know, the radiation and you're weaker and stuff like that. Here's my point. That was his right. It was his life. It was his right to say, I'll take the radiation and the such and such, or I won't. And if he passed away, that was his right to do that. And the problem I see here, one of the problems to me, is when it comes to even constitutionally, you can't come ask me what's wrong with me. If I put in for off for work for sick, right? They can deny it, or they can, if you got a job where you have sick leave, or they can approve it. But they can't say to you, what's wrong with you? Give me your diagnosis. And, well, you have to take medicine. No, they can't. You know, there's HIPAA laws, right? But now with this, for some reason, it's you haven't you taken a vaccine, and they want to, you know, do different kinds of things where whether or not you can go to the NFL game, whether or not you can go in a bar, whether or not you can get on a plane or travel or stuff like that. I got some serious constitutional questions about that, because isn't that a health choice? And I'm not taking a position it's good or bad, right or wrong. That's no position. This is a constitutional position. Isn't that your personal health choice? And I've heard people say, well, you know what, maybe if I was a cancer survivor, I'd think different. Or maybe if I had this or that, I may think different. But under my particular health circumstances, I don't feel like I should need to take it. People should have a right to make that decision. And you shouldn't be able to told you can't go to the game, you can't go to the pub, you can't fly, because you made a personal health decision. And I think that constitutional issue is going to come up sooner or later. It should come up sooner or later. That's, to me, what I have problems with.
Yeah, and if we had an active judicial system that we could rely upon, we'd have fought this constitutional question by now. But I think, you know, with the wishy-washy system that we have now, where we have a Supreme Court that dodges issues instead of confronting them, I think we wouldn't get anywhere with the courts. I think we're just stuck with trying to appeal to the public generally on the basis of reason and logic. I mean, come on now. It doesn't make any sense to require people to take a vaccine. And the other thing, you know, most of the people that I've talked to, if they give a reason, it's nothing to do with fear of the virus. I don't think people are really afraid of getting sick from this thing. That what they want to do is they want to be able to go visit their grandchild. They want to be able to fly. They want to be able to
Right.
act like they used to could. They want to go back to normal. And that's why a lot of people are taking it. And plus, you know, just the idea of peer pressure, that so much of that peer pressure has been I'm just astonished at how people will respond to all my friends are getting that, you know, the Facebook meme thing where it has a little picture frame around your.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I got the, you know, or I got the first one, or I got the second one. It's your business, you know. Don't tell me about it. You know, what are you trying to affect my medical decision making with my doctor? Who the heck are you to do that? But people are always. It's very frustrating. I'm sorry. That's all I can say about it. But
Yeah.
Let's think about something else. Maybe.
I got another story that I'd like to touch, and I think it's
Oh
important.
yeah, great.
Okay, and this is another one that I covered last week, and it is New York Attorney General investigating Trump organization in criminal capacity. Right now, you know, anybody that knows me knows I hate both parties. I don't, you know what I mean. I'm not a Democrat. Don't like the Democrats. Don't like the Republicans. Didn't vote for Biden. Didn't vote for Trump. Right. So I'm not a pro-Trumper. I'm not an anti-Trumper. He's not my cup of tea in the same way that Biden ain't my cup of tea. I just try to go by the facts. Now, if we look at the facts, I think here's what I believe. A couple of things. I don't see how they can move forward with anything against Donald Trump. I don't see how they can move forward with any charges against him, with anything against him, because of one word that you are very familiar with, my friend. And that word is discovery. Mm-hmm. They go after Trump, right? You're defending Trump. What are you going to do? The New York Attorney General, I want to see all their emails. Did you? Yeah, I want to see everything. There's their emails where you're emailing back and forth with Congress, with Adam Schiff, with all of these other people, with people from the New York Times. You know what I mean? I'm going to see all of that stuff. I want to see everything. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn that and I'm going to go to the investigations, all the investigations against Trump, etc. I am going to use Discovery to get a lot of stuff out. Now, what are they going to do? It's classified, etc. You know what I mean? Discovery would be a huge problem. If you look at, like, for instance, when they went after what's the guy's name that was in the Nixon administration? Roger Stone, right? I'm not a Stone fan. I've interviewed Roger Stone. I've talked to him before, right? He's a little wacky to me, you know, he's a little over the edge, but he's a human being and he has a right to I would defend him ideologically where you couldn't be further apart, but he's an American and I would defend his rights. And I think he was mistreated and I think his rights were violated, right? And so, but through Discovery, we were able to find out a number of things. We were able to find out about the DNC computers. We were able to find out that they never, the FBI, not only did they never look at the DNC computers, they never even got any written reports from the only company that did, CrowdStrike. They went by what CrowdStrike said. And not only did they not get any written reports, CrowdStrike told them that they were going to give them a forensic summary or something, right? Never gave it to them. So the FBI went running around saying this happened and that happened, and we know this happened with the servers and that happened with the servers. But because of Discovery during the Roger Stone case, we found out that it was a bunch of bullcrap, that they had nothing. They did nothing. The federal government allowed a company to come in and say, we looked at the DNC computers and we found that. And the federal government, the FBI just said, we'll take your word for it. So we found out through Discovery. Can you imagine the things we could find out through Discovery of Donald Trump investigation? That's why I say I will be very surprised for all of these people. If you remember, all the ultra liberals, I call them, all of them were running around the day Donald Trump leaves office. They're going to hand him all of these charges and blah, 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 blah. Right. And I said, for what? What do we know that he did wrong? What evidence is that he violated? Oh, I'm sure he did something. I said, what the crap kind of argument is that? I'm sure he did something. That sounds like persecution to me. That sounds like some persecution, like what they used to do in the medieval times. Well, we know you violated the laws of God. We're going to burn you at the stake. That's what it sounds like. So for 4 years, we've been hearing they're going to get Donald Trump. And now it's like, oh, they're still going to get him. What? They're investigating him again. You've been investigating a man for 5 years. He must be clean. That's all I can think of. You've been investigating a man for 5 years. You find no charges. And now I read an article. Now the New York Attorney General is investigating him again to see what she can find. Well, obviously you're still investigating the guy. But I think they're concerned because if Donald Trump got the opportunity to do Discovery, he could go after a lot of people and he could find a lot of stuff out that they don't want. So it would be surprising. And the other part of it is this. Joe Biden's son, Hunter, this whole Ukraine stuff, crooked, you know, I researched this stuff long before most people heard anything about Ukraine. I did a show on WPFW like a year and a half ago where I talked about all of the Hunter Biden crap, right? So Hunter Biden's crooked as a barrel of fish hooks. And Joe also, when it comes to Ukraine, China, Romania, I mean, on and on. You know, these guys, basically, you know how the globalist crooks are. They'll make money in any country they can make it in. On the moon, if they can make a crooked dollar on the moon. So Hunter Biden's running around doing 60 Minutes when he's dirty, rotten to the core, illegal. And basically, they're covering up for Hunter Biden, yet Trump is out of office and they still are investigating him, looking for something to find. You know what I mean? And it's like, do I really believe that Hunter Biden is being investigated by the DOJ and his father's president and his father is implicated in this stuff too? Do I really believe that the Biden DOJ is doing a legal investigation of Biden people when they did an illegal, the whole investigation against Donald Trump? And I researched this and studied it and reported on it. And as I said, I'm a lefty. I'm no Trump fan, but the data says what it is. They were crooked from day one, it was a witch hunt. Donald Trump was 100% right. There's a lot of things he's been wrong about, but he was right. It was a witch hunt, an illegal witch hunt against him. And now that he's out of office, the whoever the lady is up in New York is trying to continue with this same witch hunt. But as I said, Discovery. Do you think they want to allow Discovery with all of the things they've been doing behind the scenes? I don't.
You're an optimist. I like the idea that we could win some points by going through a prosecution of President Trump. On the other hand, I think the real issue is the election coming up. He's still eligible to run for president again. And I think the idea is to grab as many headlines as possible using prosecution, just like they did with the impeachment effort. Covered the newspapers for 2 years with that, or 3 years with that. And this will be just the way that they'll blockade the press with anti-Trump allegations. And that's all it has to be, is just a lot of allegations that they'll throw. I was noticing on Twitter today that the Council of Foreign Relations, the CFR, is actually in charge of all of the major media. You might have seen this chart. It's like a chart that's got a matrix of maybe 100 or 200 major media companies with their little logos and lines drawn, and all the lines up at the top at the Council of Foreign Relations. And I think that's the machine that will use that type of publicity to once again keep anybody from looking at the real facts behind Donald Trump, and to just keep on generating memes and hit pieces, and just like they've done before. Because I do believe that if anybody's going to rise up with the flag of the Make America Great Again, nobody's going to do it except for Trump, unless Trump appoints somebody. He says, I'm not going to do it, but here, I want you to vote for, Rand Paul or something like that.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, when you look at it, I think you may be right. Part of the thing they want to probably do is just smear as long as they can, to try to stop it. Because let's not forget, right after when Trump left office, they were like, we need to come up with something. Remember, they wanted to impeach Trump, and they wanted the punishment to be that he couldn't hold office again. Remember that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, and I was like, well, wait a minute. He can't hold office. You didn't say he can't run. That means you ain't scared that he's going to run. You're scared he's going to beat you. What you're saying is, hey, we want to pass a law so that the next time this guy beats us, he can't hold office. If you thought he was he couldn't possibly win, nobody would vote for him. He's a complete anomaly. There's no way he could win. Well, you wouldn't have to pass that law. You just beat him. Instead, they're like, oh, crap, he might beat us again. Quick, let's pass a law that says even if he beats us again, he can't hold office. And if you think about that, think about the kind of mentality, the kind of fascist mentality that's saying we got to make sure this person, anybody, this person or that person doesn't hold office. Why don't you say, we got to make sure that we have policies that appeal to the American people, that we appeal to the American people. You can't beat us because the American people will vote for us. Not, you can't beat us because we're going to pass a law that says even if you beat us, you can't hold office. And that's what that was about. There's another important story, if you don't mind, that I really wanted to hit before we leave. It's an important story, and you'll see why. Huge story. Everybody out there, look this story up. And this is the name of the story. It's in Newsweek. Exclusive. Inside the military's secret undercover army. Have you heard about this story?
I did see the headline for it, but I didn't read it.
It's huge. Listen to this. I'll read a little bit of it. The largest undercover force the world has ever known is the one created by the Pentagon over the last decade. Some 60,000 people now belong to this secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called signature reduction. The force, more than 10 times the size of the clandestine elements of the CIA, and listen to this, this is an important word, carries out domestic and foreign assignments, both in military uniforms and under civilian cover. Listen to this, in real life and online. Sometimes hiding in private businesses, consultancies, some of them household name companies. So what and this is in Newsweek, it's called Exclusive, Inside the Military's Secret Undercover Army. So what we're now finding out is that not the CIA, not the FBI, the military has a 60,000 person strong army that works in the US and supposedly overseas. When you read this like that picture they're showing right now, that is a van, it's a truck that they're going to set up with, that's in the story, people can go look at it, they're setting it up with listening devices and stuff so they can ride around and listen. That's part of this. So this is the military, right? They got people online. That means they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're doing stuff online, right? This is the military. 60,000 people. Then when you read that story, they talk about people whose job is to hide these people, to make sure nobody knows they're military, to make sure nobody knows they're for the government. 60,000 people. Think about it. We got 50 states. That's over 10,000 people per state. If they want to assign them all to the US, over 10,000 people could be assigned right here in Maryland. Easily. Now, I would think they'd assign maybe more in a big state like California, New York, and maybe, but who knows? We're close to DC. They may have 10, 15,000 of them right here in this area. So now we're finding out that the military has people. First of all, shouldn't that be illegal? You mean to tell me the military can have people who are online? That could be in our chat right now. They could be everywhere, online, doing stuff, influencing things, lying, cheating, doing all the stuff that they're doing. So that's, to me, that's horrifying to me. That's not even the CIA for all they're doing. We're scared of the CIA and there's 60,000 military people running around here doing God only knows what. And who's to say they're not killing people? Who's to say they're not taking pictures of people saying, oh, I caught you doing this. I'll take a picture of you. That way I can blackmail or threaten you with it later if I need it.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing this out. I'll study that story. I shied away from Newsweek for a while, but sometimes they're the ones that report things that we need to know. And that's very, very astute for Grab. Thank you for pointing that out.
There's other places that have stories on it too. So this is not just Newsweek. It's covered. Mm-hmm. If people go search that story, there's other stuff. But that's where we are right. That's why I say that's kind of the first thing I thought about, secret police. Doesn't that sound like, because usually when you get these fascist totalitarian countries, they've got a secret police that's not. It's not part of the police. It's not part of, you know what I mean? It's its own, and they go around and they make people disappear and they do all kinds of things and watch people and stuff like that. So, I mean, that to me smacks of a secret police force, like, the Stasi or whatever, to, God only knows what they'll do.
The Gestapo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Geheime Staatspolizei. The secret state police. Exactly what they are. The two things that come to mind. First, when I studied Fletcher Prouty's work, the Secret Team and the JFK and the CIA book, you notice that he very much wants us to understand that the CIA created these things called focal points. Mm-hmm. And focal points went into all of the military and all of the civilian agencies, all the executive departments. A focal point was what Alan Dulles, who was the director of the CIA for that decade, was created so that he could bypass a normal chain of command and just call somebody up and say, hey, I need some helicopter parts flown to Tongsa Nut by 4 o'clock Friday, and he would know it would be done, or something more nefarious would get done, just because he had this network. It's a CIA network, and gradually, when we went from my father's era, when he was brought into the Pentagon in the outfit called Saxa, gradually they got rid of the real military chain of command and put CIA guys in general officers' uniforms. And that's what I think we're seeing in the military now, is just an expansion of that, so that we wouldn't expect that you can't expect the military to be independent of the CIA anymore. In my opinion, they are simply another asset that the CIA can use, and they don't need to hide it anymore. They just say, well, we've got JSOC now, so we just everything moves according to our schedule, and we don't have to ask, we just tell. As a matter of fact, the Joint Chiefs of Command of Staff are more like staffing officers than they are action officers anymore. That's the way I understand it, and it appears to be the case. You used to have military officers that would say, I even think of running for president. Douglas MacArthur almost ran for president, and other people have thought about it, but because they had some patriotism and love for country that sometimes came out in the form of political action after they were finished being generals. But now we have generals that are basically subservient to the needs of these secret people behind the scenes. And yeah, everything we've talked about tonight indicates that there is real criminal activity going on to cover up and enrich this greedy exploitation of our citizens, whether they're the old people in the nursing homes or just anybody on the street trying to open a bakery or a small shop to sell baseball bats and gloves to kids. You can't do it anymore. Mitt Romney and the people have come in and consolidated everything, taken the roots out of our Main Street businesses and made it virtually impossible to do it. And now with the COVID lockdowns, they're trying to substitute a small amount of money, handout, grants. And I think the end game is to give us all some type of a stipend every year. It's just you can. Here's let's say maybe $18,000 a year. We'll give you $1,500 a month, and that'll take care of you. You don't need to have that little. Why should you bother going and running a business when you can just kick back and enjoy your life on this little bit of money we'll give you? Universal basic income idea. But also then the second thing that comes to mind is George Webb's reporting about the MAVNI program, the military assets vital in need in times of in military assets vital in times of insurrection, I think it's called MAVNI. And what that is they've been bringing people in from foreign countries such as Pakistan and other countries under the theory that these people have essential skills that our military will need if there is an insurrection. That meaning if the people of this country were to rise up, they would have these folks there that were able to respond. And we do have a lot of secret stuff going on, secret armies, secret militias, but also when you think of those officers that you just spoke of, 60,000 military officers spread around the country, then I see a chain of command ready to be formed, so that you could, if you had a bunch of operatives or people that were just sleepers that were there that had come in on this MAVNI program or otherwise, and you decided to make a play, then you could stage some type of insurrection. It's like the false flag, of course, just throw a Molotov cocktail at the Capitol or something and call it an insurrection. and boom, you've got your instant officer corps and your enlisted people, and you go out and you just take over the streets. That is the way it works. That's the 20th century. How many countries in Europe did that happen to? This is the way these things go down. We see this stuff just infiltrating all around us. The security at the Capitol. We shouldn't have security at the Capitol. That's the people's house. If we can't just go walk into our own Capitol, then the whole idea of this country has fallen away. But I've described it before. I think we've still got the basic structure of the house of our country, but the walls and the windows and the ceilings are all caving in and stuff. If we don't start shoring up the floor and rebuilding the walls and putting a roof over our heads, we're going to lose the entire structure of our republic. As you've been pointing out tonight, we've got to keep on raising consciousness of all of these issues. So thank you very much for raising all these things. What about these 60,000 people? Do you see that the way I do, as a possible core of some type of a totalitarian, and you use the word fascist takeover?
Well, the way I see it is this: rather than a fascist takeover, fascism is something that a country devolves into. You know what I mean? It devolves slowly but surely into fascism. And that's kind of, in a way, since people say fascism as if there's one kind, there's various kinds. Just like if you say a democracy, well, there's different kinds of democracies. You know what I mean? You've got parliamentary systems, you've got a republic, you've got a democracy. You know what I mean? You've got different types. And with fascism, for instance, fascism, fasci, sticks tied together. Fascism, from the perspective of Mussolini, who invented the term, was about nothing more than the government and the corporations coming together. So that was one kind of a fascism. Now, Hitler's was more in an ethno-military fascism. So there's different kinds of fascism, different kinds of democracies. And, the way I see us falling is into a kind of a totalitarian top-down state. A guy named Sheldon Wolin, a professor, described it as inverted totalitarianism, where instead of some guy at the top that controls everything, you've got these corporations just under them that are controlling Congress and all of these people. So it looks like these people are in control, but they're not really in control. There's these corporate oligarchs behind them that are in control. And one of the things about totalitarian governments, and if anybody thinks about this, it makes sense. You got a country. You can give a crap about the people. Their lives are getting miserable. Their jobs are getting shipped away. You've turned into a financialized or a company where the only a country where the people make money on Wall Street through complex financial tools, and the average person can't make a decent living anymore. What happens? A totalitarian state starts to focus on internal dissent. A totalitarian state, the biggest threat to a totalitarian state is what? Uprisings by the people. The people standing up and saying, wait a minute, we don't like this anymore. We're getting the shaft. So what do they, I noticed somebody mentioned China. This is what I have to say. China ain't the problem. Here's what I mean. We have Iran. They're supposedly our adversary. We got them encircled with bases. Russia's supposedly they're threatening us, circled with U.S. military bases. Right? China, they're horrible. They're out to get us, circled with U.S. military bases. Now, Venezuela, they're really out to screw us, circled. Isn't it interesting that all of our so-called adversaries, these countries, they're out to get us, and we have them circled in military bases? They don't have, find me a Chinese military base in North or South America. There ain't none. Russia, find one. Iran, find one. But in their areas of the world, we have them completely encircled with military bases. We're threatening them every day. And then we say, yeah, boy, that China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, whoever, they're really out to get us. They're so much out to get us that we've had to encircle them with military bases. So I say that what happens, our government is doing a misdirection play, right? Now, with the Democrats, it was easy. It's Russia and Putin. So they're out lying to you, screwing you, shafting you. They're out to get Trump with some fraudulent witch hunt. And it was who's the enemy? Why, of course, it's Russia. They're the ones out to get. It's not them. It's Russia. Now, and there's a couple of people in the chat that don't agree with me, but Garland's going to say what he believes. So now with the conservatives, they already know all they got to do is say the word. Look, they got to say communism, and conservatives will jump up in the air and their hair will be on fire. So they go, oh, no, pal, it ain't the Russians. Who is it? The Chinese communists. And then the conservatives will go, oh my God, the Chinese communists. I knew it. Now it ain't me. It's not the guy in Congress, the Republican and the Democrat, who passed the laws to send your jobs to China. They sent your jobs to China. China didn't say, hey, will you close those factories and send out? No, these billionaires said, you know what? We can lay all these Americans off, send the jobs to China for next to nothing and make a fortune. So that's what they did. There's labor, cheap laborers there. And you know what we want? We want cheap labor. So these oligarchs screwed American people, sent their jobs to China. They got rich off of China, and China made some money too. And they're like, oh man, well, geez, what are we going to do? The American people are screwed. I know. Let's blame the people that we used to make a fortune off of. So I say to the American people, you're being had, took, hoodwinked, misled, led astray. They are giving you scapegoats. My enemies ain't in Russia. They ain't in Beijing. They ain't in Moscow. They're not in Caracas, Venezuela. My enemies are on Silicon Valley. My enemies are on Wall Street. My enemies are in Capitol Hill. My enemies are the mainstream media. My enemies are not some guy 10,000 miles away that can't speak the language. My enemies are right here, and I believe that they're trying to do a misdirection play. As long as they can tell you to blame the Chinese, the Russians, the Venezuelans, people who, as I've read many a times, you got more in common with the people that your country is bombing. The people that your country is bombing, that's just trying to feed their families and live wherever they live in their village. You got more in common with them than the billionaires who are lying to you, scapegoating them, and make a fortune off the war. They're making a fortune off of you from COVID. They're making a fortune off of those people with war killing them. They're robbing you blind. So to me, don't be blinded into blaming somebody 10,000 miles away for the laws that these bastards on Capitol Hill are passing to give all the money to their friends in Wall Street and Silicon Valley and in the media and in the military industrial complex. I mean, that may be a little kind of preachy, but that's what I believe.
Well, guys, I tell you what, that's what I believe too, and I believe it very strongly. And I want to let you know that I think we've got here an excellent spokesman, and take this show or take copy parts of it, or take that last little rant of Garland's and share it with your friends. Share it around, because this is the message that we need to share. And to have somebody like Garland to give it to us with passion and direct logic, I think it's a very, very valuable thing to share. So spread the word about what we've got here. I think Garland has really put it together very, very much in a way that other people can understand quickly. So thanks for being with us again tonight, Garland. I look forward to seeing you next Monday. And let's see. Folks always ask, where do we hear Garland during the week? Give us your latest contact.
A couple of things. You can follow me at Garland Nixon on Twitter, and Garland.Nixon on Instagram, Garland Nixon on Facebook. You can email me, garlandin@gmail.com. I do a show on Radio Sputnik in DC every day called the Critical Hour from 6 to 8 p.m. I do a show on Pacifica Radio every Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. in Washington, D.C. And then sometimes I'll do after that from 7 to 8, which is actually 3 to 4 in Los Angeles on KPFK, but that's not always. So that's where you can find me. And follow my YouTube channel at Garland Nixon. I haven't been doing much lately, but I'm going to get pick it back up soon.
All right. Thanks, Garland. Thanks, everybody. Good night.